everyone. Welcome to the Edgar Allan Poe Museum. Welcome to everyone out there in Facebook land, and welcome also to the Edgar Allan Poe Shrine. As you all know, or as many of you know out there in Facebook land, we do these Sunday readings every Sunday at 12:30 this year. We started out in April doing all poetry for National Poetry Month, and this month we took a bit of a comic turn. Any of you that saw me a couple weeks ago, I did a story called Never Bet the Devil Your Head, which is an amusing little story. Poe wrote a lot of comedy. Not everyone knows that. Then last week, I read The Raven, and we had a guest speaker who read his own sort of satirical take on The Raven called Staff Call. And this week, we're having another sort of guest. It's my friend and colleague, Debbie, who I'll introduce in just a minute. Before I do that, though, I want to do what I often do and tell you a little bit about where we are right now. This is the Poe Shrine. Edgar Allan Poe grew up in this neighborhood, and he lived a couple of different places, including Baltimore, before coming back here in 1835 to work for the Southern Literary Messenger, which was a literary magazine just about 4 blocks away from where we're standing. He worked there for about a year and a half. In the 19-teens, that building was still there. And the idea was had to create a museum for Poe here in his hometown, here in his home neighborhood. And the original idea was to put the museum in that building where the Southern Literary Messenger was, because the building was still there, the magazine was gone. However, the city wanted to demolish the building. The founders of this museum tried to get the city to not demolish the building, but they failed. They demolished the building, but the founders got the bricks. And they brought them over here and used them to create this shrine. So this is where we are now, a structure created as a shrine to Edgar Allan Poe here in what we call the Enchanted Garden. The Enchanted Garden is landscaped with Poe's poetry in mind. Those founders of the museum in the early 1920s read through Poe's poems. They picked out references to plants and flowers and objects, things that are mentioned in the poem, and they paid special attention to one poem in particular called To One in Paradise. And the first few lines are, "Thou wast that all to me, love, for which my soul did pine. A green isle in the sea, love, a fountain and a shrine, all wreathed with fairy fruits and flowers, and all the flowers were mine." So those of you here can see clearly the green isle, the grass that stretches out there. There's a fountain right here, and we are within the shrine. So as I always say, this is a great place to do readings of Poe's work, to do programs. We have a bust of Poe over here. So yeah, it's a great place and a great day for it. And by the way, I and Debbie, coincidentally, are wearing our new Unhappy Hour 2019 t-shirts, available for sale at the gift shop and online. And the Unhappy Hours, if you didn't know, are a party that we do on the 4th Thursday of every month, April through October. And in fact, my colleague Debbie is in charge of all the organization and planning of those. And we've got these great new shirts for them. So we hope you buy a shirt, come back and see an Unhappy Hour. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Debbie Phillips, who is the Programs and Rentals Coordinator here. And I'll let her go. Debbie.
Thank you. Hello, Face World. Welcome to the Poe Shrine and to the Poe Museum. I did not necessarily connect with Poe when I was at school because we focused so much on the horror, and I didn't appreciate it then the way that I do now. It was his comedies that brought me back to him, particularly one called The Spectacles, which is a great story about a young man who can't see very well. And this story, 3 Sundays in a Week, it's a fun little tale. There are several different characters throughout the story, and they all have speaking parts. So at different times, I will be changing my voice. I might be changing my bodily position. Captain Pratt. Captain Smitherton. So keep an eye out for that, and I wish to apologize to anyone for any malignment of your native tongue or tongues that you've learned, as Poe uses a lot of different languages in his work. He was very educated man, especially prolific in modern and classical languages. So I never studied French, so do bear with me through my pronunciation. But I hope you enjoy this little tale of love conquers all. 3 Sundays in a week. You hard-hearted, dunder-headed, obstinate, rusty, crusty, musty, fussy old savage, said I in fancy one afternoon to my grand-uncle Rumgudgeon, shaking my fist at him in imagination. Only in imagination. The fact is, some trivial discrepancy did exist just then between what I said and what I had not the courage to say, between what I did and what I had half a mind to do. The old porpoise, as I opened the drawing room door, was sitting with his feet upon the mantelpiece and a bumper of port in his paw, making strenuous efforts to accomplish the ditty, Trompe, ton vers vida, vida, ton vers ton. My dear uncle, said I, closing the door gently and approaching him with the blandest of smiles. You are always so very kind and considerate, and have evinced your benevolence in so very many ways that I feel I have only to suggest this one little point to you once more to make sure of your full acquiescence. Said he. Good boy. Go on. I am sure, my dearest uncle, you confounded old rascal, that you have no design, really, seriously, to oppose my union with Kate. This is merely a joke of yours, I know. How very pleasant you are at times. Ha ha ha, said he. Curse you, yes. To be sure, of course, I knew that you were jesting. Now, uncle, all that Kate and myself wish at present is that you would oblige us with your advice as regards the time, you know, uncle, in short, when will it be the most convenient for yourself that the wedding shall come off, you know? Come off, you scoundrel! What do you mean by that? Better wait till it goes on. Ha ha ha! Oh, that's good. Oh, that's capital. Oh, such a wit! But we all just, you know, now all we want to know, uncle, is that you would indicate the time precisely. Ha! Precisely? Yes, uncle. That is, if it would be quite agreeable to yourself. Wouldn't it answer, Bobby, if I were to leave it at random? Sometime within a year or so, for example. Must I say precisely? If you please, uncle, precisely. Well then, Bobby, my boy, you're a fine fellow, aren't you? Since you will have the exact time, why, I'll oblige you. Dear uncle, hush, sir, drowning my voice. I'll oblige you for once. You shall have my consent. And the plum, we mustn't forget the plum. Let me see, when shall it be? Today's Sunday, isn't it? Well then, you shall be married precisely now, mind, when 3 Sundays come together in a week. Do you hear me, sir? What are you gaping at? I say you shall have Kate and her plum when 3 Sundays come together in a week. But not till then, you young scapegrace, not till then if I die for it. You know me. I'm a man of my word. Now be off! Here he swallowed his bumper of port while I rushed from the room in despair. A very fine old English gentleman was my grand Uncle Rumgudgeon, but unlike him of the song, he had his weak points. He was a little, pursy, pompous, passionate, semicircular somebody with a red nose, a thick skull, a long purse, and a strong sense of his own consequence. With the best heart in the world, he contrived, with a predominant whim of contradiction, to earn for himself, among those who knew him superficially, the character of a curmudgeon. Like many excellent people, he seemed possessed with a spirit of tantalization, which might easily at a glance might have been mistaken for malevolence. To every request, a positive no was his immediate answer. But in the end, in the long end, there were exceedingly few requests which he refused. Against all attacks upon his purse, he made the most sturdy defense. And the amount extorted from him at last was generally in direct ratio with the length of the siege and the stubbornness of the resistance. In charity, no one gave more liberally or with the worse grace. For the fine arts, and especially for the belles lettres, he entertained a profound contempt. With this, he had been inspired by Casimir Perrier, whose pert little query, "À quoi un poète est-il bon?" he was in the habit of quoting with a very droll pronunciation as the ne plus ultra of logical wit. Thus, my own inkling for the muses had excited his entire displeasure. He assured me one day, when I asked him for a new copy of Horace, that the translation of poeta nascitur non fit was a nasty poet for nothing fit. a remark which I took in high dudgeon. His repugnance to the humanities had also much increased of late by an accidental bias in favor of what he supposed to be natural science. Somebody had accosted him in the street, mistaking him for no less than personage Dr. Double L.D., a lecturer upon quack physics. This set him off at a tangent, and just at the epoch of this story, for story it is getting to be after all, my grand Uncle Rumgudgeon was accessible and pacific only upon points which happened to chime in with the caprioles of the hobby that he was writing. For the rest, he laughed with his arms and legs, and his politics were stubborn and easily understood. He thought, with Horsley, that the people have nothing to do with the laws, but obey them. I had lived with the old gentleman all my life. My parents, in dying, had bequeathed me to him as a rich legacy. I believe the old villain loved me as his own child, nearly, if not quite as well as he loved Kate. But it was a dog's existence that he led me after all. From my first to my 5th year, he obliged me with very regular floggings. From 5 to 15, he threatened me hourly with the house of correction. From 15 to 20, not a day passed in which he did not promise to cut me off with a shilling. I was a sad dog, it is true, but then it was a part of my nature, a point of my faith. In Kate, however, I had a firm friend. Oh, and I knew it. She was a good girl, and she told me very sweetly that I might have her, plum and all, whenever I could badger my grand Uncle Rumgudgeon into his consent. Poor girl. She was barely 15, and without this consent, her little amounts in the funds was not compatible until 5 immeasurable summers had dragged their slow length along. What then to do? At 15, or even at 21, for I had now passed my 5th Olympiad, 5 years in prospect are very much the same as 500. In vain we besieged the old gentleman with importunities. Here was a piece de resistance, as Messieurs Ude and Perrin would say, which suited his perverse fancy to a T. It would have stirred the indignation of Job himself to see how much like an old mouser he behaved to us 2 poor wretched little mice. In his heart, he wished for nothing more ardently than our union. He had made up his mind for that all along. In fact, he would have given 10,000 pounds from his own pocket, for Kate's plum was her own, if he could have invented anything like an excuse for complying with our very natural wishes. But then we had been so imprudent as to broach the subject ourselves. Not to oppose it under such circumstances, I sincerely believe, was not in his power. I have said already that he had his weak points, but in speaking of these, I must not be misunderstood as referring to his obstinacy. That was one of his strong points. Assurément, ce n'était pas ses foibles. When I mention his weakness, I have allusion to a bizarre, old womanish superstition which beset him. He was great in dreams, portents, et genus omne of rigmarole. He was excessively punctilious, too, upon small points of honor, and, after his own fashion, was a man of his word beyond doubt. This was, in fact, one of his hobbies. The spirit of his vows he made no scruple of setting at naught, but the letter was a bond inviolable. Now it was this latter peculiarity of his disposition which Kate's ingenuity enabled us one fine day, not long after our interview in the dining room, to make a very unexpected advantage. And having thus, in the fashion of all of the modern bards and orators, exhausted all prolegomena, all the time at my command, and nearly all the room at my disposal, I will sum up in a few words what constitutes the pith of the story. It happened then, so the fates ordered it, that among the naval acquaintances of my betrothed were 2 gentlemen who had just set foot upon the shores of England after a year's absence each in foreign travel. In company with these gentlemen, my cousin and I preconcertedly paid Uncle Rumgudgeon a visit on the afternoon of Sunday, October the 10th, just 3 weeks after the memorable decision which had so cruelly defeated our hopes. For about half an hour, the conversation ran upon ordinary topics, but at last we contrived, quite naturally, to give it the following turn.
Captain Pratt. Well, I have been absent just 1 year. Just 1 year today as I live. Let me see. Yes, this is October the 10th. You remember, Mr. Rumgudgeon, I called this year to bid you goodbye. And by the way, it does seem something like a coincidence, does it not, that our friend Captain Switherton here has been absent exactly a year also. A year today.
Smitherton. Yes, just 1 year to a fraction. You will remember, Mr. Rumgudgeon, that I called with Captain Pratt on this very day last year to pay my parting respects. Yes, I remember it very well. Very queer indeed. Both of you gone just 1 year. Very strange coincidence indeed. Just what Dr. Double LD would denominate an extraordinary coincidence. Dr. Double.
To be sure, Papa, it is something strange. But then Captain Pratt and Captain Switherton didn't go altogether the same route, and that makes a difference, you know.
I don't know any such thing, you hussy! How should I? I think it only makes the matter more remarkable. Why, Dr. Double LD...
Why, Papa, Captain Pratt went round the Cape of Good Horn, and Captain Switherton doubled the Cape of Good Hope.
Precisely! The one went east and the other went west, you jade! And they both have gone quite round the world. By the by, Dr. Double LD...
Captain Pratt, you must come and spend the evening with us tomorrow, you and Smitherton. You can tell us all about your voyage, and we'll have a game of whist and...
Whist, my dear fellow. You forget. Tomorrow will be Sunday. Some other evening.
Oh, no, fie! Robert's not quite as bad as that. Today is Sunday.
To be sure.
I beg both your pardons, but I can't be so much mistaken. I know tomorrow is Sunday because...
What are you all talking about? Wasn't yesterday Sunday, I should like to know? Yesterday, indeed! You are out. Today's Sunday, I say. Don't I know?
Oh, no, tomorrow's Sunday.
You are all mad. Every one of you. I am as positive that yesterday was Sunday as I sit upon this chair.
I see it all, Papa. This is a judgment upon you. About you know what. Let me alone and I'll explain it all in a minute. It's a very simple thing indeed. Captain Switherton says that yesterday was Sunday. So it was. He is right. Cousin Bobby, Uncle, and I say that today is Sunday. So it is. We are right. Captain Pratt maintains that tomorrow will be Sunday. So it will. He is right. The fact is, we are all right, and thus 3 Sundays have come together in a week.
By the by, Pratt, Kate has us completely. What fools we two are! Mr. Rumgudgeon, the matter stands thus. The Earth, you know, is 24,000 miles in circumference. Now this globe of the Earth turns upon its own axis, revolves, spins round these 24,000 miles of extent, going from east to west in precisely 24 hours. Do you understand, Mr. Rumgudgeon? To be sure. Dr. Double... Well, sir, that is at the rate of 1,000 miles per hour. Now suppose that I sail from this position 1,000 miles east. Of course, I anticipate the rising of the sun here at London by just 1 hour. I see the sun rise 1 hour before you do. Proceeding in the same direction, yet another 1,000 miles, I anticipate the rising by 2 hours. Another 1,000 I anticipated by 3, and so on until I go entirely round the globe and back to this spot when, having gone 24,000 miles east, I anticipate the rising of the sun in London by no less than 24 hours. That is to say, I am a day in advance of your time. Understood, eh? But Double LD Captain Pratt, on the contrary, when he had sailed 1,000 miles west of this position, was an hour, and when he had sailed 24,000 miles west, was 24 hours, or 1 day, behind the time of London. Thus with me, yesterday was Sunday, thus with you, today is Sunday, and thus with Pratt tomorrow will be Sunday. And what is Mr. Rumgudgeon, it is positively clear that we are all right. For there can be no philosophical reason assigned why the idea of one of us should have preference over the other. My eyes! Well, Kate! Well, Bobby, this is a judgment upon me, as you say. But I am a man of my word. Mark that! You shall have her. Boy, plum and all, when you please. Done up by Jove. 3 Sundays all in a row. I'll go and take double LD's opinion upon that. If you enjoyed it, come back for the unhappy hour. It's a miserable time this Thursday from 6 to 9.
All right, that was great. I think we should have Debbie breed more of these later on. Thank you all for coming. Please enjoy the rest of your time here. If you have any questions about anything, let us know.